it's Caitlin from C-SPAN. Did you know that C-SPAN has been serving the American people for 45 years? Since our founding in 1979, C-SPAN has been documenting history with a unique approach, unfiltered, without commentary, and entirely independent from government funding. C-SPAN is funded by fees from our cable and satellite distribution partners. And now, with fewer people subscribing to cable and satellite, we're asking you to help support our next 45. Your contribution helps to ensure that we can continue to provide unfiltered, complete coverage of government proceedings on TV, online, on radio, and our mobile app, as well as context through newsletters, social media, and podcasts. Join us in preserving this legacy of access to the democratic process. Make your tax-deductible donation today at cspan.org/donate. Thank you.
This week, 2024 Campaign Trail takes you to Green Bay, Wisconsin, where presumptive Republican presidential nominee and former President Donald Trump held one of two rallies, and to the nation's capital, where President Biden delivered a message on lowering healthcare costs, joined by his 2020 primary rival, Senator Bernie Sanders. Also, some of the interviews with other candidates running in this year's presidential race from our Washington Journal morning program, and a look at the large field of candidates seeking U.S. House seats in Colorado. But first, a look at the primary wins from this past Tuesday's contests. First, in New York, President Biden took 91.5%, easily beating author Marianne Williamson and retiring Congressman Dean Phillips of Minnesota. On the GOP ticket, former President Trump took more than 82% of the vote, but nearly 13% still cast their ballot for Nikki Haley, who dropped out of the race last month. In Connecticut, President Biden took nearly 85% of the returns, but more than 11% of Democratic voters were uncommitted, a sign of protest against U.S. support for Israel's war in Gaza. Just 4% of Connecticut Republicans were uncommitted, and 14% chose Nikki Haley over the winner, former President Trump. In Rhode Island, much of the same, just under 15% uncommitted for Democrats, with President Biden easily winning with more than 82% of the vote. And for Republicans in the Ocean State, nearly 85% in favor of the 45th president, but just over 10% still voting for Nikki Haley. And in Wisconsin, just more than 8% of Democrats chose uninstructed versus the 88+% who chose President Biden. Just under 80% of Republicans in Wisconsin chose former President Trump. The rest split their votes between candidates who dropped out or uninstructed. Their wins this week bring President Biden's delegate count to 3,036 and former President Trump's to 1,861. Next, part of former President Trump's rally in Green Bay, Wisconsin from this past Tuesday, before primary polls closed there. It was one of two stops he made that day, the earlier being in another Midwest swing state, Michigan.
Think of it, the legions and legions of Biden migrants pouring into it's really becoming a third world country. We are actually becoming, if you think about it, a third world country. And it's no wonder Joe Biden and his thugs are so desperate to stop us. They know that we are the only ones who can stop them. That's why they're weaponizing law enforcement, high-level election interference against Biden's top political opponent. Who does that happen to be? Me, here I am. I got indicted more than Alphonse Capone. Al Capone. Scarface. You know how bad he was? You know, I know some of the guys in the front row. They're tough guys. If you ever looked at Alphonse Capone, you wouldn't be tough at all. You'd be dead by the morning, most likely. I got indicted more than Alphonse. Alphonse was a tough man. They did a movie called Scarface. Check it out. Even if it was half true, you don't want to deal with him. But the fact is, the people understand it. They get it. It's election interference at the highest level. Never happened in our country before. How about Fani? Fani. F-A-N-I. Fanny. It's Fanny. I call her Fanny Wade. No, what kind of stuff is this? And this was done in conjunction with the White House. The DA in Manhattan was done in conjunction with the White House. They actually took people and put them into the DA's office. The Attorney General, yesterday to be more accurate, I put in a bond, $175 million. I put up a bond, but on something where I was not guilty of anything. I did a great job. The bank said he's one of our cherished customers. I borrowed money at their request, because that's what they do. They lend money. I borrowed money. I paid it back. I actually paid it back early. They want to charge me $450 million fine. This was a corrupt judge in New York, out of control. The fine was lowered substantially. But think of it. I have to put up, you see, this is all election interference, because that's money I could have used on the election. This is all election. Put up $175 million. Nobody ever heard of a $175 million bond. I'm very proud of the fact I don't think there's been $175 million. A bond is for $500,000, $1 million, or much less than that. A bond isn't for this. And this is what they used a statute to go after me that was never used before. It's a consumer fraud statute, has never been used for this before. These are corrupt people. There was no problem. There was no anything. This was like a perfect transaction. Charged me $450 million fine. These are sick people, and we have to go on, and we have to win, and we have to hope the appeals courts are honest, because if they're not honest, this country, I'll tell you, where are we going? This has been such a blight on New York.
President Biden, meanwhile, turned from Tuesday's primary to a healthcare message on Wednesday. He was joined then by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, his one-time rival in the 2020 race for the Democratic presidential nomination. CNN reported the pair joined together for a healthcare-focused campaign message, since the independent senator is seen by progressive voters to be particularly strong on the issue.
Our nation is politically divided. Nobody doubts that. But there is one issue that the American people, whether they are Republicans, Democrats, or independents, whether they're conservative or progressive, are united on. And that is that we are sick and tired of paying by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Despite all of that, the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress are beginning to make some progress. What have we accomplished over the last several years? As a result of the Inflation Reduction Act that not one single Republican voted for, seniors with diabetes are paying no more than $35 a month for the insulin that they need. Beginning next year, and this is a very big deal, seniors will be paying no more than $2,000 a year out of pocket for prescription drugs. But, let us be clear, despite all that we have accomplished up to now, it is not enough. Much, much more needs to be done. In his State of the Union address, President Biden called on Congress to pass legislation to cap out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for all Americans at no more than $2,000 a year, and to substantially increase the number of drugs that can be negotiated with the pharmaceutical industry. I strongly agree with him. Working together, we can take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry and substantially lower the cost of prescription drugs in America. And when we do that, we will be lowering the cost of health care in our country. I want to thank President Biden for what he has done on this issue up to now, and I look forward to working with the President as we go forward.
We're here today to talk about how we're lowering prices and cracking down on unfair competition in prescription drugs. I'm a capitalist. Capitalism, though, without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation. That's what's going on, exploitation. When Big Pharma doesn't play by the rules, competitors can't offer lower prices for generic drugs and devices that carry that medication, so prices are raised artificially. And folks, all of our progress is in stark contrast to my predecessor and mega Republicans in Congress. They want to, quote, I love their word they love, they want to terminate the Affordable Care Act. I love it, terminate. As my predecessor says, kicking millions of Americans off their health insurance. And by the way, the vast majority of these people would not be able to get insurance because they have a pre-existing condition. They also want to eliminate the Inflation Reduction Act, eliminate the savings to lower prescription drug prices, and so much more. During the last administration, my predecessor exploded the national debt more than any previous president in history in a 4-year term. More than any previous. He talks about the debt, he exploded it more than any other president in a 4-year term. With his $2 trillion tax cut that overwhelmingly benefited the very wealthy and the biggest corporations in America. Now he and his Republicans in Congress want to cut Social Security, raise the age, and cut Medicare, while they cut taxes for the very wealthy again. You know, I got a better idea. I'm going to protect Social Security and Medicare along with Bernie and other members of Congress to make sure the wealthy begin to pay their fair share to keep these programs solvent. Not hard. Trump brags about he's the reason Roe v. Wade was overturned. Here's his quote, I did something no one thought possible. I got rid of Roe v. Wade, end of quote. And now he and his MAGA officials are calling for a national ban on the right to choose in every state. I promise you, with the Democratic Congress, Kamala and I will make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again, I promise you. But we know we've made historic progress in the last 3 years. $35 for insulin for seniors, $35 a month for inhalers, for asthma, $2,000 a year total cap on costs for seniors. We're lowering the cost of some of the most expensive prescription drugs for seniors. And what we want to do next is these caps and costs for everyone, not just seniors. With Bernie's help, we're showing how health care ought to be a right, not a privilege in America. And that's why I've never been more optimistic about it. I really mean it. You've heard me say in this very room how optimistic. I am optimistic because the laws we got passed are now coming into effect, whether it's infrastructure or whether it's this. I mean, there's so much more. We have to, and I've said this many times, and I'll get out of your hair. You know, we have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. I mean, this is from the bottom of my heart. We're united. There's nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. We're the only nation, as a student of history, that I can find that's come out of every crisis we've entered stronger than we went in.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal morning program featured interviews with a number of other presidential candidates this week. Next, some of our interviews with authors and presidential candidates Marianne Williamson and Cornel West, and Jason Palmer, the surprise winner of this year's American Samoa Democratic presidential primary.
You were out of the race, you're back into the race. What motivated that?
Well, I suspended because I had done very poorly on an electoral basis in those first 3 primary states. And so kind of what you do in such a case is you say, okay, I'm out. And then I realized there's something bigger than the horse race here. And that's the conversation that the American people need to be having with ourselves. It's not just about the political establishment and their power games. It's about where America is today and the American people having a serious conversation about where we need to go. The political establishment is not always the conduit for the deepest conversation. So I jumped right back in because I knew that the conversation was not over that I was having with the American people.
As far as the conversation is, what questions should the American people be asking ourselves at this stage?
Who's running this country? We're not a government of the people, by the people, and for the people at this point, as Abraham Lincoln said we should be. He said that the men who died at Gettysburg for the North had died so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth. It's perishing now. We're a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. Most people in this town are very aware of that. And yet most political conversation among the elite, among the establishment, does more to obfuscate that fact than to actually clarify it and to provide solutions.
I suppose you've heard them from people, if President Biden does have the delegates, why not just go ahead and support him and keep going that way?
Well, I believe that I am supporting the president because I am talking about the things that I believe the Democratic Party needs to stand for in order to win.
If you were president, then what would a Cornel West administration do to change the plight of poor people specifically than others have promised or, and I guess in your opinion, haven't delivered yet?
Well, I mean, Biden has just authorized $200 billion for B-21 bombers. We could abolish poverty with a little over $200 billion. I'm an abolitionist when it comes to poverty, just like Martin King. I'm an abolitionist when it comes to homelessness. I just spent wonderful time with my brothers and sisters there on the East Side Cafe here in Los Angeles at El Sereno Community Garden. No housing. I was just at Skid Row with Master Q in Los Angeles. Skid Row has thousands and thousands of people. How can we be the richest nation in the history of the world and have so many poor people and homeless people? Well, we got organized greed in the real estate industry. You got organized greed when it comes to housing, organized greed when it comes to healthcare, more and more organized greed when it comes to education. This is what happens when you have organized greed unleashed on a society with little accountability, and the most vulnerable are those who are most affected. It's got to be a moral compass when you talk about leadership in the country. And you know that's so true in regard to the genocide and the ethnic cleansing and the ugly apartheid-like conditions in Gaza. That's a fundamental moral litmus test. We sit there and watch it taking place and still enable more billions of dollars to allow the military equipment that we produce from our tax money to go to killing and maiming children, 13,000 precious Palestinian children, and we act as if we can do nothing. I mean, this is spiritual sickness, my brother. It really is, and that's true for any people, no matter who it would be, black, white, red, Jewish, Lithuanian, or Ethiopian. But in this case, they're Palestinian, but it's in Gaza. I see it in LA. I see it, of course, in New York. I see it in Chicago. And yet we want to congratulate ourselves as if somehow the economy is doing so well and we're bouncing back. No, we are in a spiritual, moral, and political crisis of profound proportions.
I'm in this race because I believe in ideas, and this should really be an election about ideas. And so if you go to my website at palmerforpresident.us, you'll see we're talking about conscious capitalism, the new collar economy. We're talking about modernizing government. I'm a technology entrepreneur and investor by background, and we really need to pass the torch to the next generation, to people who are entrepreneurs, technologically literate, move our country into the 21st century. We're overdue for that.
How do you keep American Samoa from being the high water mark of your presidential campaign?
That is a super good question. I've recently, I think, done the first presidential campaign pivot in history to introduce my new organization called Together! And Together is going to be focused on electing 20 people to office this fall, some Democrats and some Republicans, that bring the country back to the center. We need to bring our country back together. That's been a big part of my message all along, probably the part that's most resonating with people in American Samoa and elsewhere.
You live in Baltimore, Maryland?
I do live in Baltimore, Maryland, yeah.
Why not run for Congress in Baltimore, Maryland? Why set your sights on President of the United States?
That's a good question. I actually have a favorite candidate. My own state has a Senate race going on, and also recently my congressman decided to resign, and there's a new Congress race going on there. I actually like the candidates for mayor, Senate, and Congress in Maryland, and will support all three of them. It's a timing thing. There was not a focus on congressional races back in October, November when I decided to get in the race. And also, honestly, if you run for one of the 435 Congress seats, people don't notice your message. The ideas are important to get out there.
You like your local and state elected officials. Do you not like Joe Biden?
No, I do like Joe Biden, actually. Joe Biden and I agree on probably 90% of things. But there are a couple key things where we differ. The federal government is running a massive deficit for many years, Trump and Biden administrations, and we need to get the federal deficit into balance, which I have a plan to do over 5 years. I'm a Quaker by background, and I've been speaking out on Gaza since October, November last year, that we need to have a ceasefire there. We need to work towards a two-state solution. The Netanyahu government has been a terrible partner for the United States, not just this year, but for many years. And the Gaza policy has been changing. I've noticed the Biden administration changing it.
What's the path forward here? What happens in your mind at the Democratic National Convention this summer?
Yeah, so we're still negotiating the details of that, but my goal is to give the people of American Samoa a voice on stage, to share a little bit more about their culture and the issues that they care about. There are many territories in the United States that don't get enough attention. Puerto Rico is probably the one that gets the most attention, but it's also been crapped on a lot. The people of Puerto Rico are overdue for statehood. People of Washington, D.C. are overdue for statehood. Northern Marianas, Guam, Virgin Islands. There are, many parts of the United States that don't get enough airtime, and people don't know that we have these colonies that are now territories all over the world.
How many times have you been to American Samoa?
I have never been to American Samoa. I think that was probably the biggest surprise for people.
Also from this week's Washington Journal, some of our conversation with Lee Drutman of the New America Foundation. He talked about the impact of independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on this year's race.
Well, it's going to be a very close election between Trump and Biden. And Kennedy seems to be pretty consistently polling around 10 to 12%. Probably some of that support will drain as we get closer to the November election, but he's going to be a factor, and a chaos factor, because we really don't know whether he's going to take more votes from Biden or from Trump, or bring in some other part of the electorate that typically doesn't vote. So it's creating a high level of uncertainty about what the outcome is going to be this November.
So when you say he's polling around 10%, what do we know about that? What variability in that polling has there been? And who are they? Who are the people that are saying, I'm voting for RFK Jr.?
Well, so let's start with the variability, because actually his support averages out to about 10 to 12%, but it's kind of all over the place. I've seen him as low as 3% in polls and as high as 22% in polls. So why is his support so all over the place? And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that pollsters are not sure how to capture his supporters and how to weight his supporters, because what connects many of his supporters, people who say they would vote for him in polls, is that they're kind of anti-system voters. He's going to be the sledgehammer. I mean, it's a very violent image that he's just going to smash everything. He's going against corporations. He's going against government. He's the merger of government and corporations. The entire system is rotten. The entire system is corrupt. We have to take a sledgehammer to it. That is a very violent, aggressive approach to governing. And yet, when you look at trust in our institutions, across institutions, when you look at how people feel about Washington, there is a level of resonance for a message like that.
One last note on this year's presidential race. The self-described nonpartisan political group No Labels announced Thursday it would no longer seek to run a presidential ticket in this year's election. In a statement, the group said, quote, "We would only offer our ballot line to a ticket if we could identify candidates with a credible path to winning the White House. No such candidates emerged, so the responsible course of action is for us to stand down." A look now at some political fundraising highlights from this past week. In Ohio's U.S. Senate race, incumbent Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown raised more than $12 million in the first quarter of this year, the Hill newspaper reported. That puts the three-term senator at $13.5 million in the bank, far eclipsing his Republican challenger Bernie Moreno, who had just $2.39 million on hand at the end of last month. And in New York, Republican Representative Elise Stefanik pulled in $7 million this past quarter after focusing on anti-Semitism in a number of high-profile hearings. That was compared to $5 million the previous quarter.
Caitlin Kim is a Washington, D.C. reporter for Colorado Public Radio, and recently put out this piece. A lot of people are running for Congress right now. Not all of them will make it to Colorado's primary ballot. What are the paths to becoming a member of Congress in Colorado?
Well, there are two pretty straightforward paths. One is petitioning on the ballot. You collect signatures for Congress this year. It's 1,500 valid signatures that have to get approved by the Secretary of State's office. The other path is the assembly path, and that is when you candidates will go and make a pitch to different county delegates and then the congressional district delegates, and then finally, if it happens at the state GOP or Democratic Assembly, make a pitch there, and there candidates have to get at least 30% of the delegates to vote for them to get on the primary ballot. And there is technically a third option, which is now called the hybrid option, where you petition to get on the ballot and you get the 1,500 signatures, but you also go the assembly route and you have to get at least 10% of delegates to vote for you there. The delegate route is important because whoever wins the assembly typically gets the top line of the ballot, so their name would be first. Whoever gets 30% or more, first name, and then it goes down after that. And if you petition on, you come in after that list of names. So there is some incentive to do the assembly route as well as showing that you've got grassroots support.
And does going the assembly route also get you a little bit of extra cachet with the local party folks because you're interacting with them more?
Yes. I mean, obviously, these are probably the most ardent Republicans in the state. These are people who are giving up their weekends, their evenings to meet together and become delegates. But these are also probably the more really Republican voters in the state as well. There have been questions in the past about whether or not the candidate that gets through the assembly is actually a candidate that can appeal to a wider audience in the general election, which I think is something that a lot of states, not just Colorado, have to deal with when it comes to Republican and Democratic primaries.
And so these kind of dual pathways have resulted in a lot of candidates in some of these districts. Your piece mentioned Colorado districts 3, 4, and 5. How many candidates are we looking at here?
I mean, in total,
yeah,
with all those races, I mean, at one point they all topped 20. It has thinned a bit, but right now, Congressional District 4, which is the race to replace Ken Buck, is the widest field. There are over 10 declared Republican candidates in that race, so it is huge. So far, only 2 candidates have made the primary ballot, and that is Lauren Boebert, the congresswoman from the 3rd Congressional District, who moved to run in the 4th Congressional District, which is a safer Republican seat, and Deborah Flora. She is a past senatorial candidate. She tried to get the GOP nomination in 2022. She's also a local, she was a local radio host and a parental rights advocate. And she's from Douglas County, which is the most populous county in CD4. But there are a host of others that are still waiting to find out if they get on the ballot. There is a candidate, Ted Harvey. He's a former state senator. He is going solely through the delegate route. So he's hoping to get 30% of the delegates on Friday to get on the ballot. If he doesn't get 30%, that's it. He's done with this race. There are a number of candidates there's one candidate at least who's just going the petition route, which is Mike Lynch. He's a state representative. He has submitted his petitions, but he's waiting to find out if he hit the required 1,500 signatures. And that we might not find that out until the end of April. April 26th, I think, is the deadline for that. Jerry Sonnenberg, another candidate, Richard Holtorf, another candidate. I think they're going to go for the hybrid route, which is they're still waiting on their petitions, but they're also going to probably go to the assembly to try and get the 10%. And there are a host of others that are probably going to try and do that as well.
Is this an unusual number of candidates, or has this dual track process tended to create a large field in these primaries in years past?
I think the dual track hasn't created a large field in the past. I think this is a unique process. This is a unique race. I think, as you mentioned, CD3, 4, and 5 are all unique. These are the 3 congressional districts that are Republican leaning in Colorado. And as you know, Colorado as a state has trended bluer and more Democratic over the last years. Which used to be a solidly red state became purple and now is solidly blue. And there are not a lot of places for Republican candidates or Republicans have a deep bench in Colorado, and there's not a lot of upward movement. They haven't won a statewide race since, I believe, 2014. There might have been one 2016 Regents race, but they haven't won statewide in a long time. So these races are opportunities for lawmakers, for people who want to move up in the Republican ranks and get somewhere like Congress. This is a rare opportunity for them. Doug Lamborn, who's the incumbent for the 5th congressional district, has been in that seat since He won it in 2006. Ken Buck won it in 2014. I mean, these seats have been held by these gentlemen for a really long time. I think Lauren Boebert is the only one that's sort of the outlier. She won her seat in 2020. She had a really close race in 2022, won that seat by 546 in a race that no one was expecting to be close at all. And she surprised a lot of people when she decided to not run for reelection in her current seat, but rather move across the state to run in Buck's seat. And like I said, the most Republican-leaning seat of the state.
And these three districts, 3, 4, and 5, are really islands of red in a blue state at this point. What motivates voters there? What are the issues they're looking at?
I mean, I will say they're different depending on which region you're in. You call it an island, but like 3 and 4 are the largest geographical districts in the state. Like 3 makes up the entire western slope in southern Colorado, and then and 4 is the eastern plains in southern Colorado. Geographically, they're huge. You can spend hours driving from point to point. But for the Eastern Plains, or CD4, it's a lot of rural issues. Agriculture, water, are sort of and concerns about growth are the local issues that drive voters. But there are also national issues that are driving voters that I've heard from them as I've talked to them across the week. Immigration, the border, inflation and prices. You hear this over and over again, especially from Republican voters. CD5 is a little different. CD5 is Colorado Springs, which has historically been a very Republican-leaning town or city in Colorado. It's the only congressional district that's never elected a Democrat. But even CD5 has changed. It used to be a larger district, but redistricting in 2020 made it small and focused pretty much on Colorado Springs. And Colorado Springs is a changing city. It is more urban. You're having more urban issues. Growth, again, is the big one here. Cost of living. So there are different issues that are driving voters. I will say Colorado Springs, I think, is going to be an interesting race to watch because last year, Colorado Springs elected an unaffiliated mayor for the first time. And that, for Republicans, should be a little warning sign that maybe a far-right candidate is not going to do as well as they typically would have done. But again, I think that's a change that you'll probably see in coming years, maybe not this cycle.
Caitlin Kim, you can read her work at cpr.org. Thanks so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you, Nate.
A reminder, this program and all of C-SPAN's campaign 2024 coverage can be found online at cspan.org/campaign.